And the bagpipes sound again, 81 years on from the D-Day landings of World War II.
And coming up, the push for penicillin, how Winston Churchill called for supplies of the wonder drug ahead of D-Day.
It's 81 years since D-Day, the largest military seaborne operation ever attempted, and the start of the Allied forces campaign to liberate Nazi-occupied northwest Europe. British, French, American and Canadian troops mounted an attack on German forces on the coast of northern France. More than 5,000 ships and landing craft were used to take around 150,000 troops to 5 Normandy beaches. And it's thought around 4,415 Allied personnel were killed on D-Day alone. Well, today, there are several official events taking place to mark the anniversary across the UK and France, as Jessica Lane reports.
This is it. They're on the beach, plunging waist deep into the sea.
81 years ago, the largest ever group of Allied troops, ships and vehicles all arrived here in Normandy, hoping to defeat Hitler's armies from land, sea and air. Thousands died and many more were wounded. Today, the sun rose over those who came to remember.
People that have been coming back year on year, for 50 years, there's always a tear in their eye when they walk up and down and just see the memorial and the great welcome that the French, and it's not just the French here, there's Belgium, there's Dutch, there's even German supporters here as well, and it's very emotional.
On Gold Beach in Normandy, kayakers were piped ashore. Then local school children greeted Royal Marines and exchanged gifts.
We were stood on that landing craft, and as the ramp went down, it was one of the most poignant moments of our lives, because we couldn't help but imagine what it must have been like for our forebears who did it for real. Last year was obviously a big anniversary, the 80th. The important thing is that we do this every year because we need to keep the memories alive.
Defence Secretary John Healey joined others laying wreaths as part of this ceremony at the British Normandy Memorial at Vers-sur-Mer.
Remember here on this memorial the 22,442 brave servicemen and women under British command who fought and fell in the Normandy campaign. But the legacy of the fallen and the courage, determination and commitment of all those who fought in the campaign has given us the Europe in which we live today.
Watched by a few surviving veterans and groups of children, generations gathered together to give thanks.
At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Winston Churchill made efforts to secure enough penicillin ahead of the D-Day landings, which took place 81 years ago today, in anticipation of the huge military effort ahead. The BBC has seen official papers unearthed by the National Archives, which show the wartime Prime Minister's frustration at the lack of supplies of what was considered a new wonder drug. Hugh Pym reports.
The drug known as penicillin, the marvellous new cure for various types of blood poisoning.
It was discovered in a London lab in 1928, and it was a team of Oxford scientists who carried out the first successful trials with penicillin more than a decade later.
Penicillin was placed in one of them, and that is now perfectly clear.
But Britain couldn't produce what was billed as a wonder drug at scale, so researchers went to the United States. American companies ramped up production during World War II. But with the Normandy landings approaching in 1944, Winston Churchill was getting frustrated at the lack of British supplies. A report from the time by officials on attempts to boost penicillin production shows Churchill's note, "Good, good, press on." And on another report he instructs, "Let me have proposals for a more abundant supply from Great Britain."
This is it. They're on the beach.
But just 2 weeks before D-Day, officials confirmed there was enough penicillin, largely thanks to US supplies, and that made a big difference to treatment of casualties.
We've seen accounts from men who were sat in hospital watching their wounds heal in front of them, wounds that they assumed that they would otherwise have died from. So it's a really remarkable innovation from a social history point of view, from a medical history point of view.
A few months after D-Day, the Prime Minister was still concerned, saying it was disappointing and discouraging that though it was a British discovery, the Americans were already far ahead. The limited supplies were confined to the military. This telegram has a plea by a doctor for doses for a child, saying no hope without penicillin, but it was turned down. It wouldn't be generally available till 1946. Today, veterans gathered in Normandy to mark the D-Day anniversary. Nowadays, antibiotics like penicillin are taken for granted, but 81 years ago it could make the difference between life and death. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
And finally, the bravery and sacrifice made on the beaches of Normandy in 1944 were remembered today on the 81st anniversary of the D-Day landings. The dwindling number of surviving veterans attended memorial services and wreaths were laid in honour of the thousands of Allied soldiers who lost their lives in Operation Overlord. Chloe Keedy reports from Normandy.
On a peaceful summer's morning, it's hard to imagine the violence that washed over these shores 81 years ago. But Gold Beach sits in the shadow of its history and a monument to the thousands of British soldiers who died in the push to liberate France. This morning, the last living veterans of that battle were back to remember comrades who never came home from here. As a flypast roared overhead, on the ground, they were given a hero's welcome.
This was me just before D-Day.
Then 19, and now 100-year-old Mervyn Kirsch remembers being sent ashore on Gold Beach and towards German gunfire.
The early hours of the morning, and as you could see the coastline coming closer, it suddenly dawned on me what was happening. I got out my book of Psalms and read from it, and I felt better after that, and it worked because I'm still here, not like these guys.
More than 150,000 Allied troops landed in Normandy on D-Day. It was a pivotal moment in their fight against the Nazis, but military success came at a devastating human cost. In Bayeux Cemetery, amongst nearly 5,000 graves, today there were just a handful of surviving Normandy veterans. One of them, Marie Scott, was just 17 on D-Day, a switchboard operator who suddenly found herself sending and receiving messages from soldiers on the beaches.
I could hear everything. Incessant machine gun fire, cannon, bombs dropping, aircraft, men shouting orders, and just men screaming, some of whom were probably being shot at the same time.
Why is it so important to you to keep coming back here each year?
What gives me particular pleasure is the school children that come up to me, interested in what happened, wanting to know, and saying to me at the end, we shan't forget.
Because if remembrance is also about learning the lessons of war, it is as much about the future as it is about the past. Chloe Keedy, ITV News, Normandy.